I stood on the precipice of my ancestral failure. Below me, stretching across the 76th floor window of the Kaelen Tower, lay the entire history of Kaelen Aeronautics. The sprawling hangars, the research labs, the gleaming silver nose of the prototype jet that would now never fly. All of it was gone. My fists, balled so tight the knuckles were white, trembled inside the sleeves of my custom-tailored suit, the uniform of the Alpha CEO I no longer was. I, Elias Kaelen, the wolf, was supposed to be the fortress, the foundation that could withstand any storm. Instead, I was the last brick to fall. A voice, low and perfectly modulated, broke the oppressive silence of the executive suite. "You look unwell, Mr. Kaelen. Is the loss of autonomy proving difficult?" I turned to face him. Ronan Thorne. The Oracle. He sat behind my desk, which was now his desk, the massive slab of antique oak dwarfed by his presence. He was not muscular like an alpha, he was lean, lethal, and devastatingly precise. Everything about him, from the minimalist black suit to the glacial blue gaze, screamed calculation. He was the wealthiest man in the world because he saw everything not as a commodity, but as a data point in a perpetually shifting algorithm. And for the last 6 months, I had been his target variable. His status as an enigma, a genetic rarity even above an alpha in terms of cognitive power and sheer pheromonal influence, meant that when he spoke, the air itself seemed to vibrate with unspoken command. Most alphas, myself included, instinctively bristled against the Enigma's absolute dominance, a primal urge to challenge the anomaly. But there was no challenge left. "You have what you wanted, Thorne," I grit out, trying to keep my voice steady. The scent of my own raw, bitter cedarwood pheromones felt thin, pathetic, in his space. "The board has signed. The assets are yours. Just tell the employees that they'll keep their jobs." Ronan lifted a single, elegant eyebrow. "Ah, the predictable alpha concern for the pack. Commendable, but inefficient." He tapped a sleek, black tablet. "I have already optimized the organizational structure. 92% retention for the production line, 50% for executive oversight. You may keep your personal security detail, Luca, for now." Relief, sharp and sudden, pierced the shame. My people were safe. I had bought them time. I could walk away with my dignity, if nothing else. "Good," I said, trying to push past him toward the door. "Then this transaction is complete." But Ronan didn't move. He leaned back, the leather of the chair creaking faintly, the only sound in the dead quiet room. His blue eyes locked onto mine, and the faint, cold scent of his Enigma presence, like polished metal and static electricity, intensified just enough to hold me in place. "Hardly, Elias," he said, using my first name for the first time, a startling intimacy that felt like a violation. "The transaction is not complete. There is one non-negotiable term remaining." He slid a single document across the polished oak. It wasn't a standard corporate appendix or a patent transfer. It was a marriage contract, pre-signed and notarized, with my name left blank. The blood drained from my face, taking my pride with it. The shame was a visceral, burning thing. He didn't just want my company. He wanted me. "No," I choked out, the word a rusty blade in my throat. Ronan's expression did not change. "Yes. The Kaelen R&D pipeline, specifically Project Ours, is too valuable to risk integration failure. It contains proprietary biometric data linked to your lineage. The quickest, cleanest, and most legally binding way to secure perpetual access, circumvent any last-minute legal filings, and symbolize the complete fusion of our houses is through a mating contract." I felt the urge to roar, to smash the mahogany desk into splinters, to force him to acknowledge me as an alpha, not a clause. But the shame paralyzed me. I was a puppet, stripped of my rank, my resources, and now, my sovereignty. He was forcing the ultimate humiliation on the most dominant dynamic, a forced claim. "You are not an omega, Elias," Ronan observed, as if reading the boiling question in my mind. "You are an alpha. But I am an enigma. And this is not about biology. It is about ownership and control." He slid a pen across the table. "You sign, and your former employees are safe. You refuse, and I liquidate the Kaelen debt, sell off the remaining assets, and bury every single life's work of your family in intellectual property limbo. The choice is yours, asset." My breath hitched. The entire history of Kaelen Aeronautics, the livelihoods of those 92%, rested on this single act of self-annihilation. I looked at the pen. I looked at the contract. I looked into the cold, victorious blue eyes of the man who had bought my life. And I picked up the pen. The signature was shaky, ugly. The ink bled into the paper, mirroring the hemorrhage in my chest. I signed away my name, my alpha status, and my future to a man whose scent smelled like the end of the world. When I finished, I didn't look at Ronan. I only heard the soft, satisfied click of his expensive German pen as he capped it. "Welcome to Thorne Dynamics, Mr. Kaelen Thorne," he murmured. "Our marriage will be announced tomorrow at the close of the market." I walked out of the office I would never again command, leaving behind not just a company, but the core of who I was. The wolf had been broken, neutered, and caged. Chapter 1: The Surrender of Kaelen Aeronautics. The days immediately following the signing were a blur of cold efficiency. Ronan Thorne managed my life like a logistical puzzle, solving every variable with chilling precision. There were no emotional pleas, no whispered threats, only dictated schedules. A prenuptial agreement, an ironclad document that left me with the clothes on my back but secured a sizable trust fund for the Kaelen R&D veterans, was shoved in front of me. I signed it without reading. It was meaningless now. My alpha strength was all gone. The core of my being, the relentless drive to lead, to protect, to create, had been systematically dismantled. It wasn't the loss of the money that broke me, it was the loss of the fight. Ronan hadn't just defeated me, he had proven that my entire ideology of aggressive, hands-on leadership was obsolete against his detached, algorithmic strategy. The media coverage was a symphony of shock and speculation. Elias Kaelen, the notoriously solitary alpha head of Kaelen Aeronautics, marrying Ronan Thorne, the reclusive Enigma tech god? It made no sense to anyone unless they knew the brutal truth. It was a corporate acquisition finalized in a gold band. The wedding itself was a small, high-security affair, an exchange of vows, not rings, in front of a handful of corporate lawyers and one or two handpicked journalists. Ronan, standing before me in a stark white suit, looked less like a groom and more like a high priest of efficiency, sacrificing a virgin to the altar of global market domination. I wore a dark charcoal suit, the fabric suffocating me. When I was asked if I took Ronan to be my lawfully wedded husband, the word felt like a lie too vast to articulate, so I simply nodded. My vow was a silence, a protest so complete it was a sound unto itself. After the non-ceremony, I was transported to my new prison, the Pinnacle Penthouse. It sat atop Ronan's global headquarters, a steel and glass needle piercing the Manhattan skyline. The elevator ride alone was an exercise in technological oppression. It knew my biometric signature, my caloric intake goal, and my mood, displaying the data discreetly on the frosted glass walls. I was already less a person and more a walking hard drive. When the doors slid open on the 72nd floor, I was met by the silence. The apartment was vast, minimalist, and terrifyingly expensive. Every surface was polished marble or seamless glass. There were no messy books, no forgotten coffee mugs, no signs of human imperfection. It was the architectural equivalent of a perfect algorithm. A pale, sleek woman named Evelyn, Ronan's executive assistant, who smelled faintly of omega suppressants, met me. She offered a brief, unsettlingly polite tour. "Mr. Kaelen Thorne," she said, her voice a soothing corporate drone. "Your wing is here." She led me through a long, illuminated hallway. Ronan's wing, she explained, was located at the opposite end, behind a large, automated privacy door. My wing was expansive, occupying nearly a third of the penthouse, designed with a master suite, a dedicated study, and a fully equipped private training facility. She stopped at a heavy, paneled door leading from my study directly to Ronan's domain. It was locked. "This door," Evelyn explained, pointing to the embedded biometric scanner, "is set to only open with the primary Alpha and Enigma signatures, yours and Mr. Thorne's. However, at Mr. Thorne's command, it defaults to lock from both sides. We maintain separate residential logistics to ensure optimal performance. Mr. Thorne values his privacy." Privacy. Right. It was a lock to keep me in. It was a clear designation: you are separate. You are contained. She handed me a slim, black ID card. "This gives you access to the kitchen, the main terrace, and the private gym on this floor. You are free to move within the perimeter. Any travel outside requires a 48-hour advance request to Mr. Thorne's security detail for vetting and planning. I looked down at the card. It didn't feel like a key, it felt like a tag. And Ronan? I asked, my voice rough. Mr. Thorne is currently on a 10-day deployment to the Tokyo office, she replied, her eyes completely devoid of warmth. He trusts the technology in the penthouse. It learns and adapts to your needs faster than any human staff could. Your physical and nutritional metrics have already been synced with the central AI. Enjoy your stay, Mr. Kaelen Thorne. With a final, unnerving corporate smile, she was gone, leaving me alone in the mausoleum of my marriage. I didn't unpack. I didn't inspect the pristine walk-in closet full of tailored new clothes, Ronan's choices, doubtless. I went straight to my wing, found the gym, and began to work out with a frenzied, desperate energy. I lifted, I punched, I ran until my muscles screamed, using the pain to drown out the self-loathing. The gym was state-of-the-art, of course, but it was sterile, the air perfectly conditioned, without the grit and sweat of a real training floor. I needed to reclaim something. Anything. When I finally collapsed, drenched in sweat, I felt a shadow pass over me. I looked up. Above the massive free weights rack, a sleek, black lens, part of the pervasive security and monitoring system, had tilted down. It wasn't just a camera, it was a sensor suite, measuring my cortisol, my heart rate, my oxygen saturation. Ronan was watching. Even 10 days and 6,000 miles away, the digital tentacles of his empire were still wrapped around my throat. I was nothing but data for him now. An asset. I stood up, defiance flickering like a dying ember. I walked back to my study and opened the closet. I pushed aside the luxurious, silk-lined suits and pulled out the single duffel bag that held my old life, a pair of worn-out denim jeans, a simple black t-shirt, and my military-issue alpha suppressants. I showered and changed into the worn clothes. I would not wear his velvet cage. I then went to the kitchen and looked at the automated nutrient station. The screen recommended a perfectly balanced, 1,800-calorie Mediterranean sea-based dish. I cancelled the order. I typed a single request, nutrient paste. Unflavored. 1,500 calories. A gray, odorless block of food appeared in a silver tray. It tasted like chalk and ambition. I ate every single bite. I would live like a soldier, not a prince. I would not be mauled by his comfort. I would be a stone in his perfectly engineered machine, a single piece of static in his flawless signal. He had bought my body and my company, but he had not bought my submission. For the next 10 days, I lived in this state of aggressive negation. I ran on the treadmill until my knees ached. I ate only the nutrient paste. I wore only my worn denim and black t-shirt. I was a ghost in the machine, occupying the space but refusing to conform to the program. It was working. The silence, the lack of human interaction, the routine, it gave me a sense of control. My internal scent, though still bitter with anger, was no longer ragged with despair. It was sharp, cold, and contained. I was ready for Ronan's return. I was ready for the next battle. When the notification finally pinged on my tablet, Ronan Thorne, arrival in 15 minutes, I was on the leather sofa in my study, reading an old printout of Kaelen's decommissioned Oz blueprints. I didn't move. I simply waited. The door to the main entrance hissed open, followed by the soft sound of expensive leather shoes on marble. The scent hit me first, the dominant, cold electricity of the Enigma, amplified by the confined space. It was overwhelming, a tidal wave that made the small hairs on my arms stand up. Ronan appeared in the doorway to my study. He was still in the same suit he'd worn in Tokyo, showing no signs of jet lag, looking as if he'd just stepped out of a high-resolution simulation. He stopped, his blue eyes sweeping over my worn clothes, the nutrient paste tray on the side table, and the stubborn set of my jaw. A slow, analytical smile stretched his lips, the first time I had ever seen his mask genuinely crack. It wasn't kind, it was predatory. I see the AI has failed to domesticate you, Elias, he said, his voice a low hum of power. Fascinating. Your pattern of non-compliance is statistically anomalous. He walked toward me, closing the distance, his scent, my husband's scent, filling the air until it was thick and choking. I refused to flinch, refusing to even inhale deeply. He stopped directly over me, forcing me to tilt my neck back to meet his gaze. The dominance was suffocating. I was going to give you 2 more weeks to adjust to the cage, he murmured, his gaze falling to the decommissioned blueprints in my lap. But your current state of aggressive negation is disruptive. It needs a catalyst. A field trip. He straightened up, his tone shifting instantly from intimate threat to CEO command. Pack an overnight bag, Elias. We leave in 4 hours for the Thorne Dynamics R&D facility. He tapped his tablet, and the door leading to his wing clicked open, allowing his scent to flood my personal space. You will be giving a presentation on Kaelen's proprietary data in 2 days. We will present a united front. I finally reacted, standing up to meet his height, my own alpha pheromones fighting his Enigma static. Absolutely not. I am not ready, and I am not your show dog. If you want the data, you can wait for the quarterly report. Ronan's eyes narrowed slightly, a terrifying sign that I had reached his limit. He leaned in close enough for me to feel the subtle warmth of his breath. You misunderstand the terms of your contract, husband, he whispered, the word a poison I was forced to drink. You are no longer an independent variable. You are an executive asset. You will present a united front, or Kaelen's remaining patents, the ones you sacrificed your pride to save, become proprietary, effective immediately. Do you grasp the simplicity of that transaction, Elias? Starting now. He turned away, the open door to his wing a silent invitation and a clear threat. My blood ran cold. He didn't just want me to attend, he wanted to take me away from my controlled environment and force me into his world, stripping away my last remaining defenses. I looked at the blueprints, then at the open doorway, thick with the scent of my captor. The field trip had just become a forced march. I had 4 hours to prepare for the inevitable. Chapter 2, The Silent Battlefield. I didn't pack. I threw essentials, my training gear, my spare alpha suppressants, and another 3 black t-shirts, into the same worn duffel bag. I refused to acknowledge the journey as anything more than a hostile deployment. Ronan wanted a show dog? He would get a wolf on a short, snarling leash. When I emerged into the main penthouse corridor exactly 4 hours later, Ronan was waiting by the elevator, impeccably dressed. Evelyn was there too, holding a pristine black coat and a briefcase. Ronan didn't look at my clothes, my defied jeans and t-shirt, but the faint flicker in his eye suggested the data had been logged. Efficient, he commented, his voice flat. But suboptimal attire for the facility's climate controls. I am comfortable, I replied, my voice just as level. My preferences are statistically irrelevant to the R&D presentation, I assume. He gave a slight, analytical tilt of his head. In this context, they are merely an indicator of your current aggressive negation protocol. A data point I shall manage. The trip was a blur of high-tech logistics. A silent, bulletproof vehicle whisked us to a private hangar. We boarded a Thorne Dynamics private jet, a sleek black machine that made the Kaelen prototypes look like amateur blueprints. The cabin was designed for work, not luxury, a command center with holographic displays and satellite uplinks. Ronan worked the entire flight, managing global crises with chilling detachment. I sat across the polished table from him, feigning interest in an outdated physics journal, but in reality, I was studying him. I wanted to understand the enemy, not just fear him. His movements were economical, his focus absolute. He didn't pace or fidget. He didn't waste a single gesture. The only scent he permitted to emanate was the low, steady static of his Enigma presence, a psychological blanket that pressed down on my own core, constantly reminding me of the chain of command. It wasn't intended to dominate me physically yet, but to contain me emotionally. I fought it with passive resistance. I didn't take off my suppressants. I didn't acknowledge his pheromonal pressure. I ate a pre-packaged military ration I'd smuggled into my duffel bag instead of the catered gourmet meal Evelyn offered. I was staking my claim, my body was not his territory. After 3 hours of this silent battlefield, Ronan finally looked up. He didn't ask a question, he stated an observation. Your current caloric intake and cortisol levels suggest a high-stress, low-nutrition profile, he said, not as a husband, but as a systems auditor. This is designed to maintain control, Elias. It is a futile effort. We are married. Control is a moot point. Is that how you view marriage, Ronan? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. As a control variable. I view everything as a variable, he corrected, not taking his eyes off my face. And in our specific transaction, control is the only point. You fought me to save your legacy. I respect that. But you lost. Your continued rebellion wastes both of our resources. My continued rebellion, I repeated, my lips curling in distaste, is all that remains of me. Ronan simply shrugged and went back to his holographic data stream. Then you will waste it alone. I have no intention of engaging in a contest of wills that I have already won. His casual dismissal was more crushing than any anger. He didn't even see me as a threat worth fighting. I was just a petulant problem waiting to be solved by attrition. When we landed on the remote, nameless island, the location of the Thorne Dynamics R&D facility, the air was cool, sterile, and smelled of ocean brine and refined technology. The facility itself rose from the rocky coast like a fortified, futuristic citadel, all clean lines, black glass, and perimeter defense systems. It felt less like a research campus and more like a high-tech fortress designed to hold secrets and keep the world out. We were met by the facility director, Dr. Lena Volkov, a beta woman whose efficiency rivaled Ronan's, and a personal security detachment led by a massive, silent alpha named Dmitri. I was immediately taken aback by the change in protocol. Ronan's penthouse had maintained the pretense of separation. Here, there was none. The executive suite is prepared, Mr. Thorne, Dr. Volkov reported. One master suite, as instructed, for the duration of the retreat. All data access points are secured to both your and Mr. Kaelen Thorne's biometrics. I froze. One master suite. The separation was officially over. Ronan had not just brought me here for a presentation, he had brought me here to integrate me fully into his territory. I looked at Ronan, who was already walking toward the transport, his back a wall of indifference. A necessary measure, he said without turning around. The facility's security and compartmentalization protocols do not accommodate unnecessary residential logistics. Necessary. My humiliation was now a matter of optimal performance. When we reached the suite, I understood the severity of the situation. It was luxurious, yes, with a stunning, windswept view of the Atlantic, but the entire space was open plan. The bedroom, the lounge, the study, all flowed together. There was only one door to the bathroom, and one massive, imposing bed. The moment Dmitri and the security detail departed, leaving just the two of us, the atmosphere solidified. The containment was total. I walked to the single closet, pulling out my few clothes. Ronan was already on a video call, his voice low and focused on a supply chain issue in Bangalore. I used the noise as cover, peeling off my clothes to change into my gym gear, driven by the frantic need to find a space to breathe, a place to lash out. Where is the gym? I asked sharply, tying the drawstring on my shorts. Ronan muted his call without looking at me. The primary executive fitness center is located on the sub-level 3, accessible by retinal scan. However, I have had a dedicated rack and combat simulator installed in the suite's auxiliary lounge. He gestured to a small, enclosed area I hadn't noticed immediately. Inside, a professional-grade power cage sat next to a holographic training mat. Why? I challenged. Afraid I'll talk to the staff. Ronan finally terminated the call and stood up, moving away from the cold efficiency of the window toward me. He was wearing just a simple, expensive navy sweater and dark slacks, looking less like a CEO and more like a predator examining its prey. No, Elias. I'm afraid you'll leave, he said, the words quiet and utterly sincere. You are not here to socialize. You are here to focus. And to integrate. Your physical output is critical to my data model for Kaelen's asset value. I need you optimally conditioned and confined. Confined? I spat. Thank you for the honesty. Always, he confirmed, walking past me into the bathroom. I spent the next 2 hours in that small lounge, lifting every plate until my shoulders burned. My sweat hit the antimicrobial floor mat, evaporating almost instantly. I pushed my body to the absolute limit, trying to exhaust the humiliation, trying to make the wolf inside me too tired to fight the inevitable. I didn't just want to feel strong, I wanted to be so soaked in my own alpha scent, raw pine and musk, that it might possibly push back the encroachment of his metallic control. I was finishing my last set when Ronan emerged from the bathroom. He was wearing a dark, silk robe tied loosely at the waist. His scent, which had been low and controlled all day, was now permitted a subtle freedom in his private space. It was not overtly aggressive, but it was deep, dense, and utterly possessive. He stood in the doorway and watched me, silent and utterly captivating, a dark, dangerous figure framed by the light. Your aggression patterns are predictable, but your stamina is exceptional, he mused, leaning against the doorframe, his hands tucked into his robe pockets. A valuable trait. I dropped the weights with a crash that echoed in the silent suite. I'm not a trait, Ronan. I'm your husband. Precisely, he said, pushing away from the frame and walking toward the main lounge. Which means tonight, for the first time, we will dine together, without staff, without surveillance. And tomorrow, we will discuss the presentation. Clean up, Elias. Dinner is in 30 minutes. I stood there, panting, the alpha in me vibrating with a mix of fury and something dark and terrifyingly electric that I refused to name. The silent battlefield had suddenly, terrifyingly, been declared a full-scale war. I was trapped in his territory, sharing his air, sharing his bed, and now, sharing his time. The containment was complete, and the purpose of the trip was becoming sickeningly clear. He hadn't brought me here to talk about patents. He brought me here to finally break my will. I just need to survive dinner, I thought, pulling the collar of my shirt over my nose, desperate to block his scent. I just need to survive the night. But as I walked toward the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the dark, polished mirror, wild-eyed, covered in sweat, and still wearing the old clothes of a life that no longer existed. I didn't look like a victorious alpha. I looked like a cornered animal. And the Enigma had just closed the trap. Chapter 3, The Fortress of Logic. When I emerged from the shower, the suite had transformed. The auxiliary lounge, where I'd trained, was sealed off, and the central living area had been set with a dinner table, a simple slab of black carbon fiber, illuminated by recessed track lighting. It was less a romantic dinner and more a high-security interrogation room. Ronan was waiting, still in the dark sweater and slacks, pouring a deep, blood-red wine. He wasn't dressed to impress, but his presence was enough. The air was heavy, saturated now with the intentional pressure of his Enigma scent, rich, cold, and demanding attention. I walked to the table in a fresh black t-shirt and jeans, my hair still damp, refusing the robe laid out on the bed. I needed the crisp feel of cotton against my skin, something real to hold on to. Take a seat, Elias, Ronan instructed, his eyes not leaving the wine glass. The dinner was exquisite, prepared by the facility's automated culinary unit, a seared duck breast with cherry reduction, followed by a delicate citrus tart. I ate mechanically, focusing on the texture, not the taste, refusing to compliment the meal or acknowledge the effort. I was not going to be grateful for my captivity. Ronan, however, ate with focus. He didn't engage in small talk, he engaged in psychological assessment. The Kaelen patterns show a remarkable depth of theoretical application in high-velocity propulsion, he began, finally breaking the silence. But your firm was consistently underutilizing the resources, stretching capital too thin. You valued tradition over optimization. We valued innovation over shareholder profits, I countered, placing my fork down with a sharp clink. My family never built a thing that didn't fly. We weren't interested in making money, we were interested in making history. Ronan lifted a glass of wine to his lips, a small, dismissive gesture. History is irrelevant, Elias. Only the future data stream matters. And Kaelen Aeronautics was bankrupting its future for its past. That is poor leadership. And what is this, Ronan? I snapped, gesturing to the table and the suite. Is this optimal leadership? Buying a spouse, stripping his dignity, and dragging him to your private fortress for psychological conditioning. His blue gaze finally locked onto mine, glacial and unwavering. This is necessary resource management. You are prone to emotional volatility, Elias. The merger requires stability. By securing your physical presence and mitigating your resistance, I secure my investment. It is logical. Logical, I sneered, the word tasting like ash. You call this logical? You are a monster, Ronan. You are a cold, data-driven predator who used a corporate crisis to force a mating contract. You didn't save Kaelen, you simply bought the assets and caged the wolf. You bought my body, but you will never break my will. My alpha pheromones surged, a desperate, raw release of cedar and ozone, trying to blast through the metallic oppression of his Enigma scent. It was futile, a paper shield against a steel wall. Ronan set down his glass. The change in the room was immediate and terrifying. The background noise of the ventilation system seemed to vanish. The only sound was the deep, resonant thrum of Ronan's heart, or perhaps, my own rising fear. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The sheer pressure of his Enigma presence intensified, crushing the air out of the room. It wasn't an aggressive alpha challenge, it was an absolute environmental shift. "You believe I am a monster," he murmured, his eyes holding mine with paralyzing intensity. "You are entitled to that metric. But you are wrong about one thing, Elias. This was never just about a patent pipeline." He stood up, slowly, deliberately. The sight was hypnotizing, a display of contained, terrifying power. He circled the table, stopping behind my chair. His hand came to rest lightly on my shoulder. The contact was like an electrical current, the pure, unfiltered Enigma dominance passing through the worn cotton of my shirt. I couldn't move. My muscles locked up. My own scent dissolved into nothingness. "I engineered the takeover, yes," he whispered, leaning down until his lips were near my ear. His scent, pure, concentrated static and something ancient and commanding, flooded my senses, overwhelming my suppressants. "I knew your firm was vulnerable. I knew you were the only alpha who could successfully helm that R&D. But my interest, it began long before the crisis." I felt the sudden, shocking heat of his breath against my neck. "I saw you at the Military Contractors Summit 3 years ago, Elias," he continued, the low voice a dark melody of control. "You were giving a speech on alpha leadership and risk aversion. You were perfect. Proud, furious, utterly resolute. You stood out against the mediocrity. I didn't want your patents, not primarily. I wanted you. My algorithm predicted a 0% chance of an alpha of your caliber ever yielding to a mating contract under normal circumstances. I had to create the crisis." He lifted his hand, and I felt the sudden, desperate, painful gasp of relief. He walked to the wide, glass doors leading to the stone balcony, his back to me. "Go outside, Elias," he ordered, the command impossible to disobey. "Look at the ocean. And think about the difference between a monster and a man who simply refuses to lose." I stumbled to the balcony, feeling physically ill, and sucked in the cold, clean ocean air. The waves crashed against the rocks below, mirroring the turbulence inside me. He admitted it. The whole thing was a calculated, devastating conquest engineered for my capture. My humiliation was his master plan. The air on the balcony was a little thinner, but the faint, cold scent of Ronan still clung to my lungs. Then I felt him behind me. He hadn't just followed me, he had tracked me, silent as a ghost. His hands came to rest on the stone railing, caging me between his arms and the sea. The sheer height, the crushing scent, the undeniable truth of his confession, it all converged into one moment of absolute powerlessness. "You called me a monster," Ronan breathed, his voice rougher now, no longer the detached CEO. His alpha suppressants were clearly failing under the pressure of his own emotional intensity, and a wave of pure, concentrated Enigma desire washed over me. It was not gentle. It was a conquest. He spun me around, pinning me against the cold stone railing. My knees nearly buckled. I smelled my own fear, a bitter musk that was instantly consumed by his electric dominance. "I bought your silence, your company, and your access," he growled, his face only inches from mine. "But tonight, Elias, I will take the rest." I tried to fight, to lift my arms, to unleash a proper alpha roar. But the Enigma's influence was a total shutdown. My body betrayed me, trembling not with fear, but with a visceral, primal yield. The struggle was pathetic, a pathetic whine swallowed by the sound of the ocean. "You will look at me," he commanded, his eyes burning with an intense, frightening blue fire. "You will surrender the illusion of your pride. You are mine, Elias. My partner. My asset. My husband." And then his mouth was on mine, a kiss that was a declaration of war and an act of total ownership. It was rough, demanding, and utterly devastating. The taste of wine and power. He claimed me with an intimacy so profound, so absolute, that it felt like he was rearranging my very genetic code. In that moment, trapped hundreds of feet above the sea, I stopped fighting. The wolf inside me gave a final, agonizing whimper and went silent. I was conquered, taken, and in the overwhelming darkness of my surrender, a thin, fragile thread of something else, something electric and terrifyingly desirable, snapped into existence. I didn't kiss him back, but I stopped pushing him away. My hands, which had been clenched into useless fists, finally flattened against the cold stone railing. When he finally pulled back, he didn't look victorious. He looked satisfied. He had broken my protocol, breached my security, and taken full control of the most important asset, my heart rate. Now, he whispered, his pheromones slowly receding just enough for me to breathe. Let's go inside. The night is cold, and you are mine to protect. He didn't wait for my response. He simply took my hand, his grip firm and possessive, and led me back into the single master suite. I followed him, a shell of the proud alpha who had walked into the fortress hours before. The pretense of separation was not just over, it had been incinerated. I was his, and I knew, with sickening certainty, that this was only the beginning of my true captivity. Chapter 4, Forge in Fire. The hours that followed the declaration on the balcony were a confusing, volatile mix of conquest and uneasy quiet. Ronan was meticulous in his dominance, yet careful in his execution. He did not treat me with the dismissive contempt of a captive, but with the focused intensity of a person securing a priceless, highly sensitive component. He was demanding, yes, shattering the last fragments of my alpha independence, but always with a razor-sharp control that differentiated him from the brutal, mindless savagery I had expected. It was a calculated, total yield, leaving me raw, exposed, and utterly exhausted. When the sun finally began to rise over the Atlantic, painting the glass walls of the suite in cold, pale light, Ronan was already awake. He was dressed in a pristine tactical outfit, dark gray with reinforced panels, and was reviewing reports on a translucent datapad. The air was clear, his pheromones reduced to a steady, non-threatening background hum. I lay in the massive bed, the silk sheets tangled around my legs. My body ached from the intensity of the night, but my mind was terrifyingly lucid. My alpha suppressants were long gone, burned out by the sheer force of the Enigma's presence, yet I felt no heat, no primal urge other than a heavy, overwhelming weariness. My own scent was faint, almost swallowed by the residual, cold power of my husband. I stood up, pulling a heavy robe around me, and walked to the window. The ocean was restless, matching the turbulence in my gut. Your cortisol levels remain elevated, Ronan stated, his voice professional, without turning around. The physical release was statistically successful in lowering surface aggression, but the mental anguish remains high. I will have Dr. Volkov prescribe a non-narcotic sedative. Don't, I snapped, the word hoarse. Don't treat me like a malfunctioning robot. And don't insult what happened by reducing it to a statistical success. He finally turned, his expression guarded. Then tell me, Elias. How do you label it? A breach, I whispered, fighting the sudden sting of tears. A total, humiliating breach of my autonomy. You're a damn good predator, Ronan. You know exactly how to target a core weakness. And you know exactly how to avoid answering a question with anything other than wounded pride, he countered, setting the datapad down. The vulnerability I targeted was not your alpha status, Elias. It was your loneliness. You have carried the weight of Kaelen for too long. You needed to be protected from your own relentless sense of responsibility. The sheer arrogance of his analysis was staggering, yet it hit a nerve. I hated how well he read me. That's a comfort, I said acidly. I feel so safe now that I've been claimed by the man who destroyed my life. He didn't respond, merely watching me with an unnerving stillness. The air remained suspended between us. The Cold War had returned, even after the intimacy. A moment later, an alarm, sharp, short, and highly technical, blared from Ronan's console. It wasn't the sound of a fire drill, it was the sound of a system failure. Ronan instantly shifted. The man in the silk robe vanished. The Enigma tactical commander took his place. Threat assessment, he barked into the secure comms system. Dimitri, status report. Dimitri's voice, usually a calm monotone, was tight with urgency. Sir, perimeter breach, Sector 4. Unidentified high-velocity watercraft, 3 confirmed, heavily armed. They bypassed the sonar grid. Sublevels locking down now. This is a targeted, professional strike. ETA to main facility, 10 minutes. Ronan's eyes snapped to mine. A targeted raid. They're after the R&D vault or the server core. Or both. Before he could give another order, the heavy door to the suite's auxiliary lounge, my gym, was blown inward with a dull, suppressed explosion. The reinforced steel door buckled, showering the room with debris. Standing in the smoke, backlit by the emergency sirens now flashing red across the compound, was Luca. My former security chief. The man I had entrusted with the safety of Kaelen Aeronautics. He was wearing full tactical gear, his face obscured by a ballistic mask, but I recognized the confident, lethal posture instantly. He raised his weapon, a high-powered automatic rifle. But he didn't aim at Ronan. He aimed the barrel straight toward the floor between us. Ronan Thorne. Luca's voice was distorted by the helmet comms, a terrible, familiar sound. This is a hostile takeover. We are here for the data, and we are here to rescue Elias Kaelen. Release him and the Kaelen patents, and you will be spared. The statement was a punch to the gut. Rescue me? He didn't see me as a partner, he saw me as a captive who needed saving, a final bargaining chip for the defunct company. Ronan didn't flinch. He simply reached into the cabinet next to his desk and pulled out a heavy, specialized defensive rifle, the kind used for internal security breaches. He tossed a smaller, equally lethal handgun onto the bed next to me. Do not mistake the rescue attempt for loyalty, Elias, Ronan said, his voice hard as diamond. Luca is working for my rival, the one who funded Kaelen's debt to destabilize you. He wants me dead and the Kaelen assets returned to his new boss. Luca barked a strained laugh from the doorway. Don't listen to the Enigma, Elias. He bought you. Your alpha pride demands justice. Come to us. We can restore your name. The choice crystallized in that terrifying moment. Luca offered me a chance to regain my company, my title, and my pride. Ronan offered me nothing but the continuation of a brutal, unwanted marriage. But Ronan, even while preparing for a deadly firefight, did not order me. He simply stood there, his back to the broken window, waiting for my move. Go to the reinforced bunker access point behind the media wall, Elias, Ronan commanded, his voice devoid of emotion, focused entirely on the immediate threat. It's a level 4 secure room. You are my most valuable asset, you will not be exposed to direct combat. Most valuable asset. The word grated, yet his attempt to protect me, even in the chaos, was startling. Luca, seeing my hesitation, took a step forward. Elias. Now. Choose your side. Choose your alpha. Choose Kaelen. I looked at Luca, the past, the broken dream, the false loyalty that had driven me to surrender. He didn't want me, he wanted the symbol I represented. He wanted the war to continue, and he was willing to sacrifice lives to drag me back into the inferno. I looked at Ronan, the present, the conquering tyrant, the man who had admitted to shattering me. But who, moments ago, had protected me from my own anguish, and was now preparing to stand alone against a tactical assault to defend his territory. Our territory. A cold, clear sense of duty, my alpha core, stripped bare and reforged, ignited in my chest. I wasn't just defending Ronan. I was defending the lives of the scientists, the integrity of the facility, and the last shred of my own professional honor. I was his partner, whether I liked it or not. I didn't move toward the bunker. I didn't move toward Luca. I snatched the handgun off the silk sheets. The cold, heavy metal felt familiar, grounding. He is not rescuing me, Luca, I shouted, my voice raw and loud enough to cut through the emergency sirens. He is attempting to assassinate my husband and destroy my division. You betrayed Kaelen long ago. You work for the enemy. I swung the gun up, positioning myself slightly to Ronan's flank, adopting a protective stance honed through years of self-defense training. My name is Elias Kaelen Thorne, I stated, the words locking into place like steel. And you have trespassed on my property. Luca's helmet tilted, his voice laced with venomous disbelief. You chose the Enigma over your alpha pride. You chose the cage. I chose the battle, I countered, adrenaline surging, clearing my mind of all fatigue. And you are standing in the wrong line of fire. Ronan didn't look at me. He didn't offer praise or warning. He simply nodded once, a quick, almost imperceptible dip of his head, a silent acknowledgement of my choice. Dimitri, Ronan barked into the comms, his voice now a calm, commanding force. The target is contained in the executive suite. Seal the access point from sublevel 3. We have an alpha partner engaging in fire suppression. Priorities: eliminate the threat, secure the perimeter. Before the comms even crackled with Dimitri's affirmation, Ronan fired. A focused, high-impact round slammed into the wall next to Luca, narrowly missing his shoulder. The force of the impact sent a cloud of dust and plaster flying. He fights with precision, I thought, reloading my pistol by instinct. I fight with force. Ronan opened fire on the 3 attackers who were now crowding the doorway. I followed his lead, not aiming for lethal shots, but for suppression. I fired at the joints and the body armor, driving the attackers backward, giving Ronan the precious seconds he needed to change position. We fought back to back, a terrifyingly synchronized unit. Ronan was the surgeon, precise and analytical, hitting vital points with minimal expenditure. I was the sledgehammer, laying down thick, aggressive cover fire, absorbing the return fire on the reinforced doorway, ensuring nothing made it past our shared perimeter. I heard Ronan grunt as a round scraped his shoulder armor. I didn't hesitate. I pivoted, unleashing a burst of fire that forced the attacker behind a piece of twisted metal, buying Ronan the moment he needed to reload and reposition. The fight was fast, brutal, and utterly devastating. Within 3 minutes, the attackers were neutralized, pinned down, or eliminated. Dimitri and his team swarmed the doorway moments later, securing the perimeter. I lowered my smoking pistol, breathing heavily, the smell of gunpowder overriding the fear and the Enigma's scent. I looked at Ronan. He was perfectly composed, his movements steady as he checked his shoulder and gave cold, methodical orders for the cleanup. He looked back at me, his blue eyes intense, and for the first time since I met him, the calculation was replaced by something raw and genuinely complex. "You saved my life, Elias," he said, his voice quiet against the chaos of the security sweep. He reached out and placed a hand, not on my shoulder, but on the small of my back, a firm, possessive, yet undeniably respectful touch. A statistically irrational choice, given your emotional debt to Kaelen. But an effective one. I felt the shock and fatigue finally hit, but I stood tall under his gaze. I had chosen my side. I had saved the Enigma. And in the crucible of battle, I had earned a moment of true, unadulterated alpha pride. "I don't defend my pride with treason, Ronan," I replied, meeting his gaze. "I defend my home." The word home hung between us, a profound and dangerous truth. He looked at me for a long, unforgettable moment before pulling his hand away and returning to his duties. The battle was over, but the war for my heart had just truly begun. Chapter 5: The Confession and the Crumble. The aftermath of the raid was a blur of heightened activity and cold efficiency. Dimitri's team secured the suite, collecting spent casings and bagging evidence. Ronan was a whirlwind of command, coordinating the external perimeter scan, contacting global counterintelligence teams, and briefing Dr. Volkov on the security failures. Despite the adrenaline, I felt a heavy exhaustion settle deep in my bones. I sat on the edge of the bed, the handgun placed neatly on the nightstand, watching Ronan work. The sight of him, tactical and fiercely protective of his empire, was undeniably captivating. The man who had humiliated me was also the one who had entrusted me with a weapon to defend our shared life. The paradox was crushing. When the chaos subsided an hour later, Ronan dismissed Dimitri and finally turned his full attention to me. He still looked like a warrior, his tactical suit smudged with plaster and dust, his breathing finally regulated. He approached me, not with the cold calculation of the CEO, but with the measured movement of a man who was deeply shaken. He knelt before me, taking my hands in his. "Your hands are steady, Elias," he observed, his thumb tracing the knuckles of my alpha fist. "You are an excellent partner in combat. A rare and valuable variable." "Stop talking like a machine," I pleaded, pulling my hands away gently. "Just, tell me what happened. Who was it?" Ronan sat beside me on the bed, and for the first time since the attack, he let his guard down. His scent, the Enigma static, was infused with a startling, raw note of fear and relief. It was the most human expression I had ever witnessed from him. "It was Marcus van der Veer," Ronan confessed, his voice low and tight. "My competitor, the head of global biosyn. He was the silent partner backing Luca and Kaelen's debt. He was waiting for the acquisition to fail so he could sweep in, take the tech, and blame the chaos on Kaelen's incompetence. He paused, running a hand over the stubble on his jaw. The attack was personal. Van der Veer knew the weakness of the Kaelen guard. He also knew my obsession with you. Luca's public offer, the rescue, was meant to do one of two things: either convince you to open the door, allowing them to kill me and take the patents, or if you refused, to use your loyalty as a distraction while they hit the server core. The realization hit me with nauseating force. I hadn't been a captive being rescued, I was a pawn being used to assassinate my husband. I had spent years defending men like Luca, sacrificing my freedom for their loyalty, only to find they were actively plotting my destruction. My entire philosophy of leadership, the belief in the pack, the loyalty of the Alpha to his men, was a lie. They betrayed me, I whispered, the shame returning, sharp and crippling. I signed my life away, lost everything, for their protection. And they sold me to your enemies. Ronan reached out, placing his palm firmly on my cheek. His touch was warm, heavy, and grounding. Your loyalty was honorable, Elias, he said, his blue eyes holding mine with an unsettling tenderness. But it was misplaced. That is the fundamental difference between an Alpha and an Enigma. You value the human element, I value the immutable data. The data showed Kaelen's executive team had a 78% probability of corruption and subsequent betrayal. I was right. You were wrong. His honesty was brutal, yet strangely comforting. He wasn't blaming me, he was simply stating a fact that he had foreseen. He had not just won the corporate war, he had shielded me from a fundamental betrayal I could not see. I am terrified, Elias, Ronan admitted, the confession cutting through the tension like a physical blow. Not of Van der Veer. I am terrified of losing you. When Luca aimed that weapon, my entire computational matrix froze. You are the only unpredictable variable I have ever encountered that I refuse to analyze out of the equation. I need you. I needed you to choose me. His confession, raw and stripped of all pride, completely shattered the cold image I had built up. The man who had bought my life now confessed to being afraid of losing it. The sheer emotional force of the moment was overwhelming. I leaned into his touch, too exhausted to speak. We spent the rest of the day in a state of uneasy truce. Ronan ordered the damage repaired and placed me under the medical watch of Dr. Volkov for stress assessment. He stayed by my side, not working, but simply present, reviewing the facility's security logs in silent companionship. By late afternoon, the fatigue I had been fighting since the attack deepened into something far more troubling. A wave of nausea hit me, violent and sudden. I rushed to the bathroom, dry heaving until my chest burned. Ronan was immediately at the door. Elias? What is it? Is the adrenaline crash too severe? I'm sending Volkov. No, don't, I choked out, wiping my mouth. It's just stress. It's too much. But it wasn't just stress. Over the next few hours, the nausea came in waves. More disturbingly, my scent, which had been suppressed by the sheer exhaustion of the fight, was subtly changing. The sharp cedar and musk of my alpha core felt muted, overlaid by a faint, unmistakable sweetness, a smell I couldn't place, but that felt fundamentally wrong. It was a scent that whispered of vulnerability, a profound softness I couldn't tolerate. I tried to cover it with excessive use of body wash, but the smell only grew stronger, especially when the nausea peaked. When Dr. Volkov arrived for the routine check, she was all business, but her eyes kept flickering to me with professional concern. She took blood samples and ran a battery of neurological tests, all under Ronan's vigilant gaze. He's exhausted, Mr. Thorne, she reported, keeping her voice carefully neutral. But the vitals are stabilizing. We'll run the full panel, but physically, he should recover quickly. Just, the scent profile is anomalous. Anomalous how, doctor? Ronan demanded, his tone sharp. Dr. Volkov hesitated, glancing at me. It's a subtle increase in hormonal markers that usually correlate with intense stress response, Mr. Kaelen Thorne. We'll get the quantitative results back in the morning. Rest is mandatory, sir. Complete rest. I managed a weak nod. I didn't care what the test said. I only cared that my body was betraying me again, advertising a softness I couldn't afford. The Cold War with Ronan had been fought on the battlefield of control. Now, it seemed, a new battle was brewing inside my own skin. I couldn't look Ronan in the eye. I felt weak, broken, and profoundly uneasy about the strange, sweet scent that clung to me like a curse. I knew, with the chilling certainty of instinct, that the test results would be more than just anomalous. They would be devastating. Chapter 6: The Shattering Diagnosis. The night was spent in a suffocating cycle of insomnia and low-grade dread. Every time I drifted toward sleep, the nausea would surge, pulling me back to agonizing wakefulness. I was hyper-aware of Ronan beside me, a silent, warm, immovable presence. He didn't touch me, yet his regulated breathing and the faint, cold thrum of his Enigma scent were a constant reminder that I was not alone in this fortress, nor in this bed. I hated the sweetness clinging to my skin. I scrubbed my neck and wrists raw in the bathroom, trying to eradicate the foreign softness that seemed to be eroding my alpha core. It felt like a disease, a parasitic change orchestrated by the very man who now lay in protective silence beside me. I finally fell into a shallow, fitful sleep just before dawn. When I woke, the room was bathed in the harsh, late-morning light filtering through the fortified glass. Ronan was gone. The space where he had been was cold, the sheets pulled back with the precision of a military officer. A chime sounded from the suite's secure communication terminal. It wasn't the urgent system failure tone, but a quiet, formal notification. My heart hammered against my ribs as I saw the text displayed on the screen: Dr. Volkov. Quantitative results ready. Urgent review. I got out of bed, adrenaline now replacing the fatigue. I was pulling on a robe when the door to the suite opened. It wasn't Dr. Volkov. It was Ronan. He looked exactly as he had yesterday, impeccably dressed, composed, radiating control. Except his face was bloodless, his eyes wide and vacant, fixed on some internal horror. The typical cold fire of his gaze was extinguished, replaced by a deep, shattering fear. His Enigma scent, usually so disciplined, was ragged, surging and collapsing in unstable waves of static electricity. He held a thin, printed document, the medical report, in his hand. It wasn't folded or clipped, it was simply clutched, the edges crumpled by the terrifying force of his grip. He didn't speak. He just walked to the lounge area and sank onto the carbon fiber table, dropping the paper onto the polished surface. He sat like a marionette whose strings had been cut. I walked toward him slowly, my bare feet silent on the floor. I looked down at the report. The first page was a blur of medical terminology and biomarkers. My progesterone levels were listed, numerically spiking off the charts. My alpha pheromone signature was marked as severely altered. I didn't need a medical degree to understand the summary, which was clearly highlighted at the bottom of the page, written in stark, unambiguous scientific terms. Conclusion: anomalous fetal development detected. Mr. Ronan Thorne is confirmed to be in the early stages of gestation. The biological impossibility of an alpha carrying an Enigma's child suggests a unique, previously undocumented genetic reaction to the pairing. Immediate, high-level medical monitoring is mandatory. I read the words again. Anomalous. Alpha. Gestation. The paper didn't shatter in my hands, my reality did. The world outside the glass wall spun, and the floor tilted violently under my feet. I wasn't just sick from stress, I was carrying his child. The biological truth was a violation far more profound than the forced marriage or the forced surrender. It wasn't just my pride he had taken, it was my very definition. The alpha body, the pinnacle of masculine strength and dominance, was universally recognized as incapable of conception. It was a genetic, physiological impossibility. Ronan, the oracle of logic, had somehow defied nature, and I was the grotesque vessel of his biological miracle. I dropped the paper as if it were contaminated. My body started to shake violently, not from cold or fear, but from a profound, existential despair. The shame, which I thought had peaked in the boardroom, now returned as a tidal wave. I was a freak. I was a scientific anomaly. I wasn't an alpha anymore, I was a genetic mistake. I stumbled backward until my back hit the cold glass wall, sliding down until I was huddled on the floor, dragging the thick rope tight around myself, trying to contain the terrifying truth inside. I didn't cry. I was too empty for tears. I just stared out at the crashing ocean, the waves mimicking the static white noise inside my head. I heard Ronan finally move. He didn't approach me. He simply stood a few feet away, his back to me, gripping the edge of the carbon fiber table. "I didn't know," he said, his voice a low, strangled rasp, the first time I had ever heard him sound truly lost. The data, there was no pre-existing data set for this scenario. The probability was 0. I calculated for every variable, every outcome, except this. I felt the sudden shift in his pheromones. He was no longer trying to control the environment, he was actively collapsing. The Enigma, the man who prided himself on absolute foresight, was facing a situation he could not compute, predict, or fix. He was broken. 0, I repeated, the word a dry, hollow rattle. The probability was 0. And yet, here we are. A side effect of your obsession, Ronan. A grotesque failure of my own biology. I pulled my knees to my chest, burrowing into the robe. I feel polluted. I feel like a scientific test subject. You've taken everything. My company, my loyalty, my status. And now, my very nature. I finally looked at him. His composure was completely gone. His eyes were focused on the vast, empty space, and his hands were gripping the table edge so hard his knuckles were white. Don't talk like that, he commanded, the authority in his voice thin, desperate. Elias, listen to me. This is a miracle. It is a biological advancement. This child will be the rarest lineage on the planet. I will mobilize the entire resources of Thorne Dynamics to protect you. I will build an entire wing of this facility dedicated solely to your care. You will have the best doctors, the best security. You will be safer than anyone on Earth. His promise of security, which should have been comforting, only fueled my despair. Safest asset, I corrected, a bitter laugh bubbling up. The ultimate commodity. Congratulations, Ronan. You've ensured I can never leave. Not because of a contract, but because I am now a vessel for your legacy. I am carrying the proof of my own ultimate humiliation. I finally gave in to the despair, the silence of the room amplifying the depth of my profound defeat. Ronan watched me, his body rigid. The man who had faced down an armed assault without flinching was completely paralyzed by the sight of my emotional collapse. He tried to approach, to kneel beside me, but I flinched away, my own alpha instinct screaming to protect the vulnerability I now embodied. Don't touch me, I choked out. Don't look at me. I need silence. I need to figure out what I am now. Ronan stopped, his hand hovering uselessly in the air. The realization that his power, his wealth, his logic, his dominance, was utterly meaningless in the face of my psychological anguish was visible on his face. He was the controller of the world, and he could not control the grief consuming his husband. He finally turned away completely, walking to the far corner of the lounge. He stood there, silent and broken, staring out the window at the distant, endless horizon. The Enigma had lost his map. I was alone on the floor, huddled in my shame, the life of a profound, impossible miracle growing inside me. The Alpha was gone, replaced by a devastating, beautiful tragedy. The future stretched out before me, a fortified cage, a lifetime of being studied, contained, and valued only for the miracle I carried. I closed my eyes, seeking only oblivion. Blackheart, the executive asset. Chapter 7, Rebuilding the Alpha. I remained on the floor for what felt like an eternity, submerged in a silence so profound it was almost sonic. Ronan maintained his vigil in the corner, a statue of defeat. Hours passed, marked only by the shifting light outside and the sharp, internal ache of my despair. The sheer terror of the diagnosis had finally driven the fear out of Ronan. His Enigma pheromones, which had been frantic and unstable, now settled into a low, deep, steady wave of pure protectiveness, a primal anchor in the turbulent air. It was no longer the scent of control, but the scent of devotion, heavy and suffocating in its intensity. Finally, he moved. Slowly, meticulously, he walked back to the center of the suite and knelt a respectful distance from me. He didn't reach out. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply waited until I was forced to look at him. "You are correct, Elias," he said, his voice stripped bare, devoid of the corporate polish I was so used to. "I did this. My drive, my obsession, my refusal to accept boundaries led to this outcome. I have used my intelligence and my power to create a situation that has destroyed your sense of self. I am sorry." The apology was shocking. Ronan Thorne never apologized. He simply optimized and moved on. "I don't need your pity, Ronan," I managed, my voice raw. I need my life back. I need to be an alpha again. I need to command, not carry. You've turned me into a biological novelty. What use is the wolf when he is caged and pregnant? Ronan inhaled sharply, looking away for a moment, gathering his fractured control. When his gaze returned, it was piercing, filled with a terrible certainty. I cannot fix your biology, he stated. But I can fix your caging. You are not a novelty, Elias. You are the genesis of a new bloodline. You are uniquely powerful. The Enigma dynamic amplified a latent alpha potential, forging something that was previously impossible. This is not weakness, this is unparalleled strength. He moved closer, finally reaching out to rest his forearm on the floor beside my knees. You need to command to survive, Elias. I understand that now. The asset I bought was not your body, it was your pride, your ability to rule. And I have nearly killed that asset with my selfishness. So I will give it back. He reached into the pocket of his tactical trousers and pulled out a sleek, titanium tablet. He placed it carefully on the floor between us. The screen glowed with a single, complex document. This is a legally binding amendment to the merger contract, Ronan explained, his voice gaining its steady, authoritative ring, but focused entirely on my needs. Effective immediately, you are designated co-CEO and executive director of Unified R&D. You will assume full operational control of the aerospace and defense sector, which includes the Kaelen assets, the Ars program, and 50% of the combined AI application patents. I stared at the document, speechless. Co-CEO. Full operational control. This wasn't a consolation prize, this was the throne. It was more power, more control, more territory than Kaelen Aeronautics had ever possessed, now backed by the inexhaustible resources of Thorne Dynamics. Why? I finally croaked, the exhaustion and doubt thick in my voice. Why now? You fought me for control for months. Because control is meaningless if the asset dies, Ronan countered simply. Your value, Elias, is in your fury, your passion, and your strategic genius. That fire cannot be contained, it must be aimed. Your mind is collapsing because I reduced you to a dependent. I need the alpha to survive, Elias, to protect this legacy we have accidentally created. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, raw plea. I broke you out of love and necessity. But I need to repair you out of respect and survival. Take the power, Elias. Rebuild your throne inside my empire. Stop being my consort and become my acknowledged ruler. He pushed the tablet closer. The power offered was staggering. I ran a trembling finger over the document. The language was precise, granting me autonomy over my entire division, reporting only to the unified board. It legitimized my alpha status in the only language Ronan understood, power. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The nausea was still there, the scent of sweetness still clung to me, but as I looked at the contract, a faint, familiar flicker ignited in my chest, the cold, demanding burn of command. The security, I said, my voice gaining strength. Luca and the others. They compromised Kaelen for years. I want to personally restructure the entire global security and counterintelligence framework for the unified R&D division. Starting with a full purge of every compromised name. Ronan's eyes widened slightly, the first sign of professional respect I had ever seen from him. Agreed. Your authority is absolute in this division. You will design the new perimeter. And the facility, I continued, pushing myself slowly to a seated position, looking out at the fortress. This is not just an R&D lab anymore. It's our home. I want the immediate construction of a fully fortified residential wing, customized for the highest level of threat mitigation, but designed for a family. It will not be sterile. It will be a sanctuary. Consider it done, Ronan said, his eyes alight with a terrifying, absolute sincerity. You will command the construction. You will command the security. You will command the science. You will command me in your domain. I took the tablet. My hand no longer trembled. I placed my thumb on the biometric signature pad, watching my name register next to his in the role of co-CEO. The shame was still there, but it was receding, pushed back by the formidable weight of a new, unforeseen responsibility. I was an alpha carrying a child, yes, but I was also an executive director of a multi-trillion-dollar corporation. I had been humiliated, but I was not defeated. I was reforged. Ronan watched the acceptance register, and a profound, visible wave of relief washed over him. He finally stood up, his Enigma presence settling back into its firm, stable control. But now, it felt like a supportive column, not an iron fist. He extended his hand to me. I took it, allowing him to pull me to my feet. The contact was solid, a genuine partnership. "The work starts now, Elias," he said, his gaze intense. "The world will see the two most powerful entities on the planet united. They will see you. They will see us. We are one empire." I looked down at my abdomen, where the impossible life resided. My eyes hardened with resolve. I would not let this child be a novelty. I would raise them as the heir to a throne of my own design. "Tell Dr. Volkov I want the first data models on fetal nutrient requirements," I commanded, my voice firm and clear, the alpha back in residence. "And alert my division heads. They report to me via secure channel in 1 hour. The purge begins immediately." Ronan smiled, a rare, true, and terrifying expression of pure adoration and pride. He had broken the wolf, but in doing so, he had given him an empire. Chapter 8, The Heart of the Empire. 2 years later. The change was profound, architecturally and emotionally. The Thorne Dynamics R&D facility was no longer the cold, brutalist fortress of logic I had first encountered. It was still fiercely secure, but the residential wing, now entirely Elias's domain, was a sanctuary of warm mahogany, soft lighting, and sprawling views. I had personally overseen its construction, ensuring every window was fortified, every access point secured, but every room was designed for life, not containment. I stood on the new terrace, watching the vast expanse of the Atlantic. The air here was perfectly tailored, a blend of fresh ocean salt and the complex, deep scent of Enigma alpha bonding, a protective blend of Ronan's cold static and the rich, commanding cedarwood that was now my stabilized core. The alpha in me had not been destroyed, it had been fundamentally re-engineered. The impossible pregnancy had been fraught with challenge, but also with fierce, transformative pride. My body, previously a symbol of pure dominance, had proven capable of creating a unique legacy. I was no longer a conventional alpha, I was a progenitor. My son, Alessandro Kaelen Thorne, a startlingly intelligent toddler with Ronan's piercing blue eyes and my determined jawline, was toddling across the secure, shock-absorbent turf of the playground. He was supervised by Dimitri's successor, a beta security specialist I had personally vetted, who maintained a discreet, watchful distance. The last 2 years had been a whirlwind of professional conquest. My role as executive director of Unified R&D was absolute. I hadn't just secured the Kaelen patents, I had leveraged Thorne's AI infrastructure to launch the Ars initiative globally, turning my former aerospace vision into a dominant, profitable reality. I was a CEO again, more powerful and more respected than I had ever been. I ran my division with the ruthless efficiency I had learned from Ronan, but balanced with the fierce loyalty and dedication to human innovation that was my Kaelen heritage. I was the wolf, ruling from a high-tech den. A soft chime signaled the arrival of my husband. Ronan had been gone for 72 hours, managing a critical server farm migration in Singapore. He stepped onto the terrace. He didn't look tired, he never did. But the moment his gaze found mine, the professional rigor melted away. His scent, usually a controlled hum, flared with genuine, unadulterated relief and affection. "Elias," he murmured, crossing the distance between us in 3 long strides. I met him, allowing the brief, deep kiss that was now our routine, a possessive, non-verbal exchange of trust and territorial confirmation. "The migration was successful, I assume?" I asked, pulling back, already sensing the shift back to partnership. "Flawless," Ronan confirmed, his fingers lingering on the back of my neck. 3.7% speed increase. "I have the complete data logs ready for your review." "Good. My team has optimized the Ars launch trajectory using the new AI model. We'll present the projections to the board next week." He smiled, a genuine warmth that was reserved only for me and our son. "You continue to be my most effective strategic partner, Elias. The data shows your division outperforming all projections by 18 months. I felt a surge of triumph, the alpha pride I had fought so hard to reclaim. I was no longer an asset, I was the essential, irreplaceable engine of half his empire. Our moment of professional communion was interrupted by a small, determined voice. "Papa. Look." Alessandro tottered over, holding up a small, smooth grey stone he had found by the wave line, a treasure of profound importance. I knelt down, taking the stone. "It's a beautiful stone, Alessandro. Very solid. A good foundation." Alessandro looked from me to Ronan, his brow furrowing in a serious toddler dilemma. He pointed at Ronan. "Daddy, go far away." Then he pointed at me. "Papa, stay home." He looked back at Ronan. "Papa Alpha, why not Daddy?" Ronan and I exchanged a knowing glance. This was a conversation we had rehearsed many times. The world understood that Ronan was the Enigma, the hypermale anomaly. But the term Daddy was conventional. Papa was the title I had chosen, a declaration of my unique strength. I took Alessandro's small hand in my large one, my scarred knuckles a reminder of the battle I had fought. "Alessandro," I said, my voice firm and imbued with a gentle authority. "Daddy is an enigma. He builds the sky, and he travels far away to protect our home." I tapped my chest, where the residual sweetness of the pregnancy had long since been replaced by the dominant cedar wood of a mature alpha. "And Papa is a strong alpha," I continued, holding his gaze steady. "We are different. We are stronger. It takes a very, very strong alpha to be a papa." Alessandro considered this, processing the data with his nascent enigma mind. He nodded slowly, satisfied with the logic. "Papa strong." He toddled off toward the turf again, ready to move on to his next vital mission. I watched him go, feeling the weight of the last 2 years, the agony of the betrayal, the surrender, the impossible biology, lift completely. The pain was no longer a wound, it was the scar that confirmed my survival. I was a father, a commander, and a husband. Ronan stepped close, placing his arms around my waist from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. His scent settled over me, no longer an oppressive force, but a profound, cold comfort. "You built us a true sanctuary, Elias," he murmured. "And you built yourself an empire. My analysis was correct, you were never meant to be confined. You were meant to co-rule." I leaned back into his embrace, feeling the solid, immovable strength of the man who had torn my world apart only to help me rebuild a better one. He was still the enigma, still controlling, but his focus was no longer on ownership. It was on unity. "We are a statistical anomaly, Ronan," I agreed, gazing out at the vast ocean, the boundary of our territory. "But we are stable. We are complete." I reached up, covering his hands with mine, the diamond band on my finger a silent, powerful reminder of the contract that had brought us here. This wasn't a cage. This was my throne. "Welcome home, husband," I whispered. "The board meeting on the new Ars launch can wait until after dinner."
We know the journey was intense, moving from raw pain to terrifying suspense, and finally to a deeply earned, satisfying love. If their story moved you, we have a simple request. Red Heart # like and subscribe. Please take a moment to like this story and subscribe to the Boy Love Ballad channel. Your support is the most crucial way to help our team continue creating these complex, compelling stories and reach more dedicated readers like you. Speech balloon comment. We want to hear your reaction. What was your favorite moment? Did Ronan's confession surprise you? How did you feel when Elias embraced his new role as the Alpha Papa? Drop your thoughts, theories, and questions below. We read every single comment. Thank you again for making this journey with Elias and Ronan. We look forward to seeing you in the comments and in our next story.